Did we do it? Am I live? Hello. Am I live, everyone? I think I'm live. It says that I am. So we are here. I am here all by myself. I've got George. I'm going to bring him in just a little bit. We are doing a haul video, not a live sale. We're not selling things, not yet. This Friday night, I will be doing another live sale though. But we have George here because I recently went down to Kentucky and I got a whole bunch of fun stuff at his, I'm going to call it warehouse, little mini warehouse where he stores some items from where he travels and all of this. He runs estate sales and all of this kind of stuff. And he goes pretty much and sets up at different flea markets and things and resells. So we had a chance, Misty with Thrifter Junker Vintage Hunter, me, Fatbird Finds, and Patrick, we had a chance to all go up and meet George, the Antique Nomad. His link is in the description if you are curious, but he knows a lot about the antique market because he's also an antiques appraiser. And with that comes a lot of research and looking things up. So it sticks after a while, I would imagine. But I'm going to bring George in right now. We'll get him on split screen and we're going to start. So here we are with George.
Hey, it's good to see you. And thank you. What a nice introduction. I appreciate that.
Yes. So we've got lots of fun things here. And I was really excited about picking up some of these things because I don't generally get to buy them. I'm not sure why, but I think it's the area here in Southern Illinois. Some of these things that I think they tend to go a little high at auctions. You've got some older collectors, older maybe resellers, and I can't get a stronghold in to bid on some of these things at auction. They put a lot of value on them. They're not so common around here as they are maybe over in the East Coast. Do you notice that, George, yourself, whenever you're shopping, that certain styles are more prevalent in different areas?
Absolutely. And that's part of why I became the Antique Nomad, is because I started out in Seattle. I have family in Florida who are older, and I was spending more time going back and forth between the two. And I started to notice that certain things were distributed in certain places. And, you know, Seattle got all the good California stuff because the stuff from California would be sent there. But in the old days, it wasn't like now where, you know, you go to Walmart and or Target or whatever, and the same stuff's in every store across the country. It was more expensive to ship things. And in fact, the old catalogs would say prices are higher east of the Mississippi or west of the Mississippi, depending on where it was from. So I'd go to Florida and I'd see all this great stuff that was made like in New York or in other parts of the country there. And I started to notice that there were things that people out west liked in Florida and things out west that people liked in it really, I mean, in a way, we just end up being in the moving business. We're trying to find stuff and move it to the place where it's appreciated.
Right. So some of these things are new to me because I don't usually get to see them. So I'm really excited about that. That was one of the great things. I know you made a comment that I was picking up some things that you wouldn't have imagined that I did while I was there. So I'm not sure which those would have been, but we're going to start right now on the whole video. So here's something that you probably might think I would always pick up. I've got a little Joseph original. And what's interesting about these little Joseph originals is they mislabeled them back in the day. It was a typo, and it's spelled incorrect, Joseph, but it's actually, his name is Joseph, and they just had to go with it, which is kind of a fun, I don't know, story. But you can usually identify Joseph Original actually just by the Japan sticker, which is kind of weird, but they have a very specific Japan sticker that matches. So there's their Japan sticker. And if, in this case, it's marked right on the bottom, but they would have had a matching sticker form in black and gold as well. And usually the ones with the black eyes are older. So yes, what else would you like to talk about with this one here?
Well, actually, that was really great information. And I've noticed I've been following you for, gosh, probably a year and a half or two since before I started my channel. And your level of knowledge and sophistication has really grown. And everything you said there was absolutely true. And I found interesting about those as well. She is April, I believe. They did one for each month. And the idea was that the little rhinestone represented the gemstone of the month. And they also did them with numbers on them. And so if you had a girl who was having a birthday, and most of these were actually given to young girls back in the 1960s when they were made, they really were not considered to be for adults, but it's mostly adults who collect them now. And yeah, I think they're just really cute. And I personally don't buy the ones with the brown eyes because they are newer, but there are collectors who like those too. And you know, they're a fun thing because they're not expensive to start collecting, but there are some really good ones. I sold one that was a tall one with a music box in it for $100 earlier this year.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah, so this one I would expect to put on. And actually, I think if I scheduled everything correctly, these are all the things I'm showing are on eBay right now, up at auction format. But this should sell, I think, for about $12 to $15 for me. And it's just in really nice shape. And so no chips or cracks. I think that'll help it too. And I did pretty well with not getting anything with chips. Some things did have chips that I didn't notice. Trust me, I know I was haphazard in putting things in the box, as some people had mentioned, but that's not what happened. I didn't chip them myself. We were looking very quickly at some things. So I'm going to show what I believe is a chocolate pot, but I feel like it could also be for lemonade. I'm not sure because it doesn't have a lid. So what would you suggest? This is made by Nippon. Oops, there we go.
You are correct that is a lemonade pitcher. And
okay.
Lemonade pitchers typically would have originally come with 5 little tumblers. And it was specifically 5 for some reason, not 6, not an even number, but 5. And that would have made a lemonade set. I don't know why they only did 5, but that was the standard.
Yeah, I've actually been wanting to get a chocolate pot for so long. I know Barb finally got one. And I was just in my head, I was thinking, oh, that's a chocolate pot in the moment. And I set it out on the video. But yeah, I think it's too tall, actually, too. Normally, the chocolate pots would be a little bit smaller in stature and have a lid.
Well,
but
that's okay. It's summer. Yeah. People need lemonade.
And actually, this is really cute because you can put that in your table, put some flowers in it. It doesn't have a lid already, so it's ready to go. I think it's great. And like I said, it is marked Nippon on the bottom. And we know that Nippon stands for Japan. That's the way they got around that law. I don't know. Do you think they were trying to actually get around the law? Was that the idea?
Well, it's funny because, you know, and I've heard you quote this, and it's true. In 1891, you know, for a long time, we would start to get an industry going, and especially the English were bad about dumping their product on our market to kill our industry so that they could keep selling us stuff. So in 1891, they passed the law as part of the Sherman Antitrust Act that you had to mark the country of origin on the bottom of things, but they didn't really enforce it evenly. And so there's a lot of stuff that was made in Nippon, which is what the Japanese call Japan, made really between 1891 and about the First World War. There's a lot of stuff that still isn't marked, but after the First World War, they made them put the Nippon mark on. They were very rigorous about it at that point. So I don't know that they were necessarily trying to, I think that when they weren't marking them, they were trying to get around something, but eventually they had no choice.
Did I hear you correctly? You said 1921?
Well, I think around 1914 you start seeing, and then around 1921, they start trying to pressure them into putting Japan instead of Nippon.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right, because there was that intermediate, that time frame when they were kind of getting around it, I think, fooling people a little bit, to think that it's not from Japan. Because
well, also,
Japan,
yeah. Also, I think they were like, well, we want to call it what we call it, and I think that we were like, oh no, it has to be in English.
Yeah. So here's another sort of Victorian style piece. Now, however, they look very similar. I mean, in style, and I would say that's a Victorian style. This one is closer to the Victorian era, and this one is actually more close to mid-century, 50s, 60s. And it's just sort of interesting. George and I were talking before we jumped on about how styles kind of rotate and revolve around. And this is a prime example. So this is a cracked egg planter made popular by Napco Ware. They did a lot of these. I actually have 2 of them. I'll just go ahead and show you both. So this one has flowers in it, and that's how I'm selling it. So you're ready to rumble. You've got your flowers. But that's what they are. So this one is in the really pretty pastel pink color, and the blue pink was really popular in the 50s, 60s as well. I don't know. I think that might have, I don't want to overspeak. I'm not sure if that would have, if they would have had, can you see that pink? It's definitely pink. I'm not going to follow that thought where I was going to take it, because I'm not that well versed in Victorian. What I was thinking is maybe the pink was an homage to the 50s, 60s design of the colors, you know?
I think they really did a lot of those pastel colors very popular in the early 60s, especially. And the Victorian had a lot to do with the fact that, you know, a lot of people start collecting because of nostalgia, and it's usually not over what their parents had, it's over what their grandparents had.
Right.
Well, in the 1960s, people's grandparents were born in like 1900. And they would have had the family keepsakes, and a lot of those would have been Victorian. And that's when you start to see a lot of people starting to collect Victorian as well. And so new things were made that went along that had that look. And the cracked eggs would have been a definitely part of that. And it's interesting to me how they've become collectible in their own right now, because we're as far away from 1960 as 1960 was from 1900, and everything comes around again, just like you said.
Yep. So that's very interesting. Now let's go to a different form altogether. I would say this is very deco, but actually, now Barb is the restaurant wear queen, I say. She loves her restaurant wear. Barb's in the chat right there. And I put my foot down on this one. I'm keeping this one because I like it. But we have this sort of skyscraper motif, which is very indicative of the Art Deco movement in that modernism pre-mid-century kind of vibe. But this actually dates to around the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. Barb, can you tell me the exact date? I'm putting her on the spot. It's number 7-CC. So that's a date code, which is pretty interesting. Usually when you see numbers on the bottoms of things, they reference the form, but they actually use restaurant wear and they put the dates on. But this is Syracuse, China. We'll see if Barb wants to chime in the date. I thought it was around the 50s, which is sort of interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that for this, although it could have been a design that they had in population for 10 years or so.
Well, that's what I guess too, is that design had been around for a while, probably since the late 30s or early 40s, and that some restaurant or hotel used it and that they just wanted to keep using it, or that they brought it back as a revival again. You'll even see some forms that come back in like the 1980s that were previous revivals of previous forms. But Syracuse, China, they did make stuff for home as well that wasn't as heavy as the restaurant wear, but Syracuse made great, really good, durable restaurant stuff. And I know so many people with kids who say, well, I like China, or I like old dinnerware, or I want to collect antiques, but I've got kids. What do I do? And restaurant wear is such a great option for them because it can take family use. I mean, you can practically drop those things on the floor without breaking them.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a couple different. Trusty Huckster, is the entire 7CC the date code to 1952, or is it partial? 7CC. I'm not sure I follow you, but Barb said 1948. It could be somewhere right around there, early 50s. One other thing I want to say about restaurant wear is it's not uncommon to find different back stamps, because different, just like ceramics and things, the molds got sold off and glassware. But we have this back stamp, vitrified ivory, and that's what restaurant wear really is. It's vitrified china. It's a very strong ceramic, basically. They're calling that modern. That's actually the name, modern, by Grindley Hotelware Co. And like I said, we have Syracuse, China. It's the same pattern. So that's just sort of an interesting tidbit about restaurant wear.
Oh yeah, because a lot of times it was made over many years, and the restaurant supply companies, they didn't care who made it. If you want to make our pattern and you're going to give us a better deal. And right after the World War II, the English economy, because of the war, was so devastated that they probably got a better deal shipping it all the way over from England than they could get buying it in America.
Yeah, I want to switch gears a little bit so we don't. I don't know how many people we have that like ceramic, but that's sort of like a wheelhouse that I really enjoy. Let's switch to a little bit of jewelry. We'll just breeze through some of this fun costume jewelry. Now, these are all on my eBay right now. You could bid on them. And I did reserve some of the jewelry that I picked up from George for my next live sale. But I want to show just a few of these. There's not a whole lot we can say about costume jewelry. At least I can't throw in some information. But this is a little brooch, or kin as I used to call it. But I think brooch is the correct term. And it's just costume jewelry. It's made pretty cheaply. It's not meant to hold much value other than its cuteness factor and its nostalgia. But I bought some of these for $2 each. We've got the little owl. So that's up on eBay right now. Now this one, it caught me really funny with the with the googly eyes. It's just so different. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be modeled after, but I bought it. And then we have this one, which I think is gorgeous. It has this cloisonne, if I'm saying it correctly. I never know if I am. Isn't it a French word? Do you know how to pronounce it?
Oh, it is. It would be cloisonne, although cloisonne is a little more specific. Really, it's more like wires that they do, and that's more of an Asian thing, even though the word is French. But that is enameled, and
this is just enameled.
yeah, but it's nice. I mean, it's cute.
The cloisonne style would have a tinfoil, not tinfoil. Speak better for me because I'm terrible at it. It would have wasn't it be a foil base with raised sections that they would backfill with enamel?
Yeah, that's right. They would actually do wires and do these designs, although there is wireless cloisonne, but let's not get off too far on a tangent and really mess everybody's minds up. But generally, that's right. Cloisonne, you'd have like, say you took a brass base and then they'd build up these wires on it and make designs, and then they'd fill in colors in the designs with enamel. Enamel is like glass and paint kind of in a suspension together, and then when they cook it in the oven, it fuses on, and that's how cloisonne is made. And enameling is essentially the same thing. It's just they don't use the wires to build it up like that. But I like the pieces that you got because they're all fun. And to be honest with you, yeah, there's some really valuable costume jewelry that's got designer names and has all this pedigree. But most people who buy jewelry, they buy it because they like the look or because it's fun. And a 70s owl and a crazy cat from the 70s or 60s, and then the exotic bird. The exotic bird's from the 80s, but it looked like and flamingos, of course, for Jeffrey. Why not? Look at the picture behind him, everybody, by the way.
I know.
Isn't that great?
Actually, the wrong way. Yeah, that was a splurge back there. This actually here is a really fun one. It's this articulated fish. Oh, it's so fun. Yeah, I say articulated, not reticulated. It's very similar. Articulated means it moves, it articulates, like, and reticulated means it's sliced. It's generally used, you generally use reticulated with metal, but I've also heard it more increasingly with anything ceramic too. But yes, so, oh, wow. That was upside down. But this is a really cute one, and I like the little eye. The little rhinestone eye. That one's on eBay. And this one you talked me into, Christopher Radko. I know them for their Christmas stuff, but I didn't know they did any jewelry. So we have Christopher Radko and this, I'm going to call it a teardrop with a poinsettia. I don't know anything about jewelry. I'm just making that up, but it's enameled flowers.
Oh, yeah. No, it's cool. And honestly, I mean, the Christopher Radko isn't wildly old, but holiday jewelry always sells. Jewelry companies, there's a viewer out there, one of my viewers who I think follows you too, named Paula, and her family worked for Coro, and which was a big jewelry company in Rhode Island. And she really told me something very interesting that I hadn't understood, which is they would produce for the different holidays and different seasons of the year, and then they would be laid off all summer long because people didn't buy jewelry in the summer. So then the holiday season was really important because that got the jewelry companies back in. So they would always do a holiday line, and that's still true today.
All right, now here's another form. So we went through ceramic, jewelry. We didn't do glass yet. We're going to do brass now. So we know brass from the 70s. That's the most recent, well, if you want to count like the last couple of years, we can, but the 70s brought back a lot of this brassware. However, this is not from the 70s. This is cast, which is kind of one way I would think that it would be older. Is this? It's just a more crude way of doing it. They cast the two pieces together, and that's why you have a seam. But it's a heavier piece, and I would say that's in a very, I don't know. Would you say deco or not deco, nouveau or
I think
either Victorian Nouveau, somewhere in there?
Yeah, I think it's nouveau because it's floral, and I think it probably does date to about 1910. And you're absolutely right about the casting because, foundry methods were different back then. They couldn't make things as thin as they can now. And so they tend to be, I didn't know there was a pair. That's great. And no, they tended to be heavy, and they would have been sold in pairs. In fact, originally, they probably were part of what they called a garniture set, which usually was 5 pieces that sat on your fireplace mantle. So you'd have 2 little vases, and then you would have had maybe a clock or a sculpture in the middle, and then generally 2 ewers on the side. So it's great that there was the pair. It's so funny, I don't even remember what I sold you.
I'm surprised. So let's do a piece of glass. So by the way, those very fun pieces, and I think that brass is, I think that's like I think this is the first 1910s kind of brass that I have bought. Usually all I can find is the 1970s stuff. But yeah, so I was really excited to get that just because of its age. Now this here threw George for a loop because it's not a very common piece, I'll say too, but it is called Flame by Fostoria. And he said in the video, and I forgot to cut it out, I would have, but I edited the video before I learned a little bit more about it. But you called this originally, what was it now?
I misidentified it. I called it Fostoria Sunray, and I know better. Sunray is actually like the rays of the sun. It has sort of like you see on the top with the flame, but it's all over the piece. And that is definitely flame. And I appreciate that Scott from Old Curiosity Shop educated you on that because first I said Sunray, and then I said, oh, well, no, that's wrong. And then I was thinking Baroque because Fostoria did some of the flame pieces with the Baroque pattern, but the Baroque has the fleur-de-lis on it. Right. It's one of those things. When I started in the business a while ago, I was mainly a glass and china dealer, and I used to know all those patterns on site. And now that I deal in all sorts of different things and I'm not a specialist anymore, if you don't use it, you lose it. So it really does pay to have a good, if you like glass, even if the prices are not the same as they used to be, it really is worth getting an old Elegant Depression glass book or that sort of thing. So you can see all the major patterns and collections of them all in one place rather than having to pick through 100 listings on eBay to try to figure out what was in the line. It's just easier. And the reference books don't sell for that much anymore. So I do recommend it.
Well, here's one interesting thing. This piece is like very clean. Like if I didn't know better, I would say it was made, 10 days ago in the warehouse. This is actually from the 30s. This is 1930s right here. It's a candy dish. And they also made in the same line a couple candlesticks. I don't think the line was very extensive though. I don't think they did, a whole bunch of it. So there's not many pieces to collect of this, but it is definitely Fostoria in the, flame. There we go, in the flame pattern.
That's right.
I'll remember that as long as I can. Hold on to it, as you were alluding to. Okay, let's do some metal items. I have a little bit of everything, it seems. Now, this is a Whitman's chocolate box. I'm going to be honest. I already had this, and I swapped it out. So this is not the one I bought from you. I kept the one that was a little bit cleaner, which was the one I bought from you. So this one I really enjoy, and I'm going to show you another chocolate box after this that I picked up. But it is Whitman's, and it is very nouveau, Art Nouveau, with a lady and all this wonderful tile work here. So yeah, I guess I'm collecting chocolate boxes now.
I love old tin and old tin boxes and old tin advertising. And I'm not sure if she's Salome, but a lot of them are based on various famous characters from literature or Greek mythology or that sort of thing. It was definitely, again, that's coming out of the Art Nouveau era. You see that very floral design, and I just think they're really neat. And one great thing about being a dealer is you get to upgrade your collection as you go along.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done that so many times. Now, let me show you the other chocolate box. This one is in beautiful shape, and I'm keeping this one. So I hate to bust the news to anybody, but it's Schrafft's. And now I'm trying to remember what Schrafft's was. I think it was just a chocolate company. I did a little research on it. So I remember that name, though. I don't know if they talked about it in some show or something, because modern culture during 50s, 60s, that would come up in TV shows. So it sounds familiar, that word, but it's a beautiful box. I mean, what do you think this one's around? When do you think? The 30s, 40s, more so 40s?
I'd say actually maybe as early as the 20s again.
Really?
I think
Wow.
so. Although, sometimes when they got a good design, they'd make it for a lot of years. We're used to people, oh, okay, it says Canco on the bottom. I think you're probably right, probably more 30s and 40s. But, sometimes when a design was really successful, they'd just keep using it. And that one actually looks like an Oriental carpet.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I didn't think about it. I was getting the Nouveau kind of moods again, just with the very loose florals, but it does sort of look like that. I have one giant 10 that I'm going to kind of hold off on because, well, I will. I'm just going to. Let me do a little bit of Shawnee, or as Misty from Purchase Junker Vintage Hunter calls it. How does she call it? It's Shawnee. She like extends the E. It's sort of funny to me. Maybe that's how you're supposed to say it. I don't know. Okay, so here we have the little lady. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Somebody got on. They this is just a slight deviation. I said little lady in a recent auction, and I was like, oh, and something for the little lady. And they thought that I meant I'm going to sell it to little ladies. So no, this is a little lady here, and she has her milk or a set. Can you concur that? Can you? Wasn't it sold as 2 milk cans and 2 ladies normally?
I suspect that that's true. One thing with salt and pepper collections, and I know that I think a bunch of you folks came over and I had a big collection that was actually from the town where the sale was that I'm selling for someone. Over the years, sometimes people lose things or they just happen to have one or the other of something and they get mixed up. And so sometimes they get mismatched. And I think that is true. I think that it was, I want to say she might be, well, I'm trying to think if she was with a boy.
A guy?
Yeah, I can't remember now, but I do believe you're right. I think that they are both Shawnee. They're cute together, but I do believe originally it would have been 2 milk cans, and then it would have been she with either a male figure or there's one similar to her that's Little Bo Peep and has a sheep with her as well. But Shawnee was a really fun pottery out of Ohio. They made all of this very whimsical ware in the 30s and 40s, and they're just they're hand painted. They're really happy. If you ever see Shawnee with gold on it, it's funny because it sells for more, but the gold was not done by Shawnee. Shawnee would take its factory seconds and sell it to this little decorating company in Ohio, and they would paint the gold on it and then resell it. And so the gold pieces, which sell for more, are actually ones that were considered inferior when they were new.
Oh, okay. Well, here's the thing. I actually like the pair. I think this is a better pair. She is just a maiden now. She's a maid of milking, or how does it go?
Perfect.
Yes. Okay. So now let's do a little bit of kitschy. I didn't buy a lot of kitschy because Misty beat me to the kitschiness. And that's really okay because I can buy kitschy a lot over here. And I wanted to find some different things. So I did get these little fellas. I think they are a hoot. So we've got the cats with the bow ties and the green hats. And I did notice a chip, which I don't think detracts too much from it, but it's a pretty superficial chip, meaning it's not that deep. And if you got a little paint, you could color that in and it would be disguised. I often say that. I don't know how many people really care about it. They just probably leave it. But I personally don't like chips. I like things to look old because we were talking about trading up. we see really nice antiques that actually have survived. And so I know what it's supposed to be. I know there's more out there that are actually chip free. So for me, I don't want a chip, but that's just my own. But it's not very noticeable, and I think they're adorable. They are marked Japan too, for the little cats.
I think they're really sweet, and I'm with you. I prefer things to not have chips, although I am finding I am not necessarily the majority anymore. A lot of people really want that worn look. They want it to look like it's had some life and had a story. And, that's legit too. It's just a different thing. I came up in the antique business with the purists, where if something had a little tiny chip, they're like 80% off, And now I don't think people are quite as fussy about things. And some people really, they don't want it to be too perfect. So that's just a different look.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, especially with YouTube and seeing all the different takes on things. People are like, I love it, Chip. I love that it has no head. Okay, I'll sell you a headless figurine. Okay, this is one of my favorite finds, just because it is so different to anything that I have purchased before. So this is, I would say, Victorian along that time frame. But what's interesting is it's pink, and it is also cased with this white milk glass interior. And now I don't get to see stuff like this very often, so I was over here studying it, and I'm like, oh, what is going on? And it almost appears to me, and you might know better than I, but it seems like it's clear glass, then pink glass, then white glass on the inside.
Very good. You are absolutely right. When you look at cameo glass, which is done the same way, where they do a color over a color, there's always a clear layer as well. So if that was cameo, they would call it 3-layer cameo. And the reason for the clear layer is each of those layers cools at a different rate, because different colors cool at a different rate in the kiln. And the clear glass was basically to kind of make sure that it all held together so it didn't explode in the kiln. The neat thing is, if you have cameo glass, what they would do is they would do those layers and then they would carve into it. So you would see the design would be one color, and then the color in the background would come through. And you'll see some cameo that's really elaborate, that's up to like 6 and 7 layers, and it was really hard to do. So yeah, it's a neat Victorian piece. I think that the gold on there is again like an applied enamel, but very thick. Probably was molded and applied, actually. And
that's what I was thinking. Do you think like a gesso or a
it looks
ceramic?
like gesso, but I think it actually is glass again, like enamel glass in suspension. And then they would apply it on the top, because if it was gesso, that's more like plaster. Now it does have some little chips on it, as
right.
you see.
It's a pretty high relief. That's why I was thinking it must be something bigger than globs of paint.
You would think, but actually, surprisingly, I think they would do them in a mold and just sort of let them set, and then they could fuse it onto the glass. So I think it really is an apple.
I'd love to see somebody making something like this, because that helps me understand a lot better.
Oh, it's so fun. There are a lot of modern glass blowers in the bigger cities, especially. And if any of you haven't seen glass be blown, it's really fascinating. And it will teach you a lot about what to look for in old glass, too, because they're using those old techniques that have been around for like 2,000 years.
I have seen glass blown, but I was more wondering how they actually did that finish on there. And it does look like a gold gilt over some material, like you're saying. Like a glass, like a fused glass or something. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. And now this is something I need help with, because I have no clue. Oh, wait a minute. Do I have a clue now? I do have a clue. I did not notice, but they marked it on the inside. Did you know that?
I didn't notice. I have to be honest, that piece came from an estate in Florida. When I bring things to the estate warehouse, it's because I have a client who can't have a sale on site, for example, and that came from a condo in Florida. And I literally unpacked it like the day before you came, and I didn't really look at it. So what does the mark say?
So let's say what this is. So this is jadeite glass with this little face, and I believe it's an egg cup. But what the mark is on the inside is a triangle with a B. Is it Boyd's or is it?
Very good. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So from the 60s, 70s. It's like a
60s,
repop, or
70s,
little
80s
bit.
even. Yeah, Boyd's produced up until, I'm not sure when they quit, but I think that they produced into the 90s. And that one it's jadeite, but you notice it's really kind of thin. It's almost what they call clam broth, where
Right.
it's sort of thin and a little bit translucent, as opposed to the jadeite like the Fire King that you see. And the thing is that, when I got into the business, Boyd's was still producing, and it was what they would sell in the collector stores, but it was new. But there's so much of Boyd's that's out of production now that there are legit collectors, and it is a collectible area in and of itself. If you hold on to something long enough, eventually it will be collectible.
Yeah, I know Boyd's produced a lot of the Fenton glass shoes. A couple other people got a hold of those molds too, or made very similar ones if they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Boyd's glass, I find their stuff pretty often, it seems like these days. Let's do a little powder jar. Now, I couldn't identify this pattern. I don't know if you happen to know it off the top of your head, but it's part of a vanity set, I would imagine. For your powder, it has these kind of ribbed lines on it.
I've heard it referred to as threaded glass,
And I would threaded.
but I don't know whether that's an official name or just something collectors call it. There were a lot of those little glass pieces that were made in this country by various glass companies, but there were similar pieces made in England as well. And that also came from that estate in Florida that had just arrived. So I didn't really do any study of that. But people like powder jars and boudoir items. I'm sure from the shape, it's probably from the 30s or 40s.
I think it's very cool. I'm going to show you now something that I just bought because of the form, but it's actually pretty cool. Now, if I could remember the name of this, I actually can't. You know the name of it because you actually wrote it on my paper, and that helps me. So that's what George gave me. It was a jumbled up mess, and I'm looking for this bird, and I'm like, oh, there it is. Lamansar?
Lamanazov.
Lamanazov.
It's a very long Russian word. And that piece, does that have the USSR mark on the bottom?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, this is when things started to thaw between the US and Russia. Lomonosov had been made for decades there, and it's very good quality porcelain. And around the 80s, when the wall was falling and perestroika happened and all of that, and we started to get along better with the Russians, then we started to see their wares be available in this country. And they made some really beautiful painted cups and saucers in deep cobalts, but they also were known for animal figures, and they're every bit the quality of like Bing and Grandal and Royal Copenhagen and some of those other European companies we were used to.
Yeah, I did notice how well it was molded and created. It sort of has that quality of finer porcelain. Definitely not Dollar Tree stuff or anything like that. Oh, I can't remember what it goes for. I'm thinking it was around 40 whenever I checked, though. So we'll see. I have it up on auction, so we'll see what actually happens with it. Now let me switch gears. We'll do a little bit of Royal Gouda, or Gouda. No, not Gouda. Get it? No, you say it.
Oh, the good news is in our country we say Gouda, and that's all that really matters. But I understand it's sort of a glottal stop like Gouda in.
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to. People here all call it Gouda, and it is the same town as Gouda cheese, if you're wondering out there.
Right. So I'm going to continue to call it Gouda because of the cheese. Nobody was going around policing the word Gouda for cheese. So
that's right.
So here we have a wonderful piece. Now I have a good number of these. Do we have any? As they see a troll or something? I don't know. I don't see anything. I don't know how many mods we have in here, but hopefully that's all under control. But we have some Royal Gouda pieces, and because they're all individually marked, which helps a lot for trying to figure out where specifically they're made. That may help, but a lot of these times they're very hard to read for me. They kind of wrote pretty quick, I bet. And so I'm just going to kind of flash these up. A lot of these are from around the teens and 20s, maybe sometimes even in the 30s. I'm going off of memory here. Tell me what you can, George. I'll show them and you can talk.
Oh, actually, you're doing great. It's true.
Okay.
The the stuff that is, it seems like the darker colors and the more Art Nouveau and the more stylized designs are a little earlier, and then they get into some lighter, like that one is definitely from the teens, and then they get into some lighter designs later. I get a lot of people on my channel saying, "Oh, I'm viewing from England or I'm viewing from someplace and it's interesting, but we don't get that stuff." But everybody in the world had access to this. It was so popular at one time. I think they imported it or exported it to like 120 different countries. And there were a whole bunch of little factories that made it. So when you show those marks on the bottom, one of those will be a pattern name, and then one of them is actually the factory it came from. And there's a whole book about this too. There's a lot of research that was done. It was very popular to collect about 30 or 40 years ago when Art Nouveau really kind of came back into style with the hippies in the 60s. If you think of all those concert posters and the funky lettering and the designs. And it was really popular in the 70s and 80s. And then it kind of went out of favor. And now people are starting to discover it again. So I think it's a very timely buy. And I'm glad you got some cool pieces.
Yeah, so those should sell for right around $20 each. Again, they're up on auction format, and I think they'll do really well. This is pretty much my second batch of Gouda that I bought from George. He actually shipped me like 15 or 20 pieces of it a couple months back, and it did really well. So I bought more when I had the opportunity. Oh, and actually, I forgot this large one. This is the biggest one that I bought. It's really pretty.
I really like that one.
Yeah, there's all the writing on the bottom.
And if you look at the bottom, that Plazuid, Plazuid, right, where you just pointed, yep, that
It's
was...
Zuid.
Yes, Zuid, thank you. Yeah, see, I massacre other languages and sometimes English quite frequently. But that is, I believe, the most highly regarded of the companies that produce there.
Right. Is it PIA or is it PZA? Now I'm mixing things together.
I think it's Plazuid,
yeah.
But that's a good name to look for if you find this stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So it was a while since I looked this stuff up. Let's go on to a little bit of Czechoslovakia stuff now. We are just traveling around the globe at this point. And here we have some very pretty and this is Czechoslovakia trophy vases. I wouldn't have known to call them trophy vases, even though obviously they look like trophies, but I believe you wrote on my paper trophy vases. And I'm like, oh, that makes good sense. But it's a pair of lusterware pieces. They've got their stamps, made in Czechoslovakia. And they're in pretty nice shape. I just bought them because it's a pair and sort of interesting color and shape. And yeah, I almost didn't buy them, but I looked at them twice and I said, no, I better get these. And you didn't charge very much for me, so I'm happy about that.
Good. Well, so, when it's an estate sale, I do appraisals, like you said, and people say, well, how come I actually had a viewer during my live haul with Misty. I think someone said, well, why didn't he just hold on to those and sell them for more? Well, when you're closing out an estate, you have a limited amount of time. And so you have to value it that way. And that's part of how dealers get merchandise and how we stay in business as dealers. So I like the Czech lusterware because we see a lot of the Japanese luster from the mid 30s, but the Czechs were doing it at the same time. And some of their stuff is really nicely done. The styles can be really graceful. And yeah, I thought those were neat too.
Yeah. So those are on eBay right now, if you want to snatch them up. So let me see here. Oh, here's a piece that nobody knows about. We don't know about. George doesn't really know. I don't know. I couldn't find anything when I researched it, but it's just a very interesting deco looking creamer, and I believe it's silver plate actually with a copper base. And you got, the way I know it's a copper base is it's actually kind of ground down there on the bottom. Not sure if somebody did that to test it or if that just happened over time, but it's just a very interesting shape that I just haven't seen that before.
I love the shape because it's such high style deco and so streamlined. And The proportions make me think of maybe it being English rather than American, but it came from an Art Deco collector in Seattle who gave me a bunch of things to sell. And I don't know how it ended up in the storage house, but it was by itself. It never had the other piece to go with it. And I just thought it was really cool. And usually metalwork like that is stamped. My guess is that it originally was 3 pieces with a tray, and maybe the tray had the mark on it. But in any event, it's just, there are a lot of people who really like that kind of very geometric Art Deco, including me. And so I think someone will love it.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was really cool. Now this one here's another piece. We don't really know for sure where it's from. You were thinking, what did you say? You didn't say Spain, did you? No, you said.
No, I do think it's probably European, and it might actually be Czech as well. Czechoslovakia was not a country until the end of World War I, and it actually was the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and eventually they split up, as we know, because they really were 2 different countries to begin with. They just were sort of put together. It's got a mark that you can't really see, but it looks like it's
the embossed. That's a number.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so the thing is, again, we think, well, if it was foreign, it would have to say that, but they weren't always good about that. And so I'm not sure where it came from. I just think it's very appealing. Again, it's definitely Art Nouveau. And so that would put it sometime in the teens, I would think.
Yeah. I bought it because of the form, not because I knew anything about it, which tends to happen, whenever you're trying something new. You kind of go off of the style more than anything, and you're feeling about it, and then you learn about it afterwards.
Yeah, and sometimes just liking something is reason enough to buy it, I mean, it's nice when you have a story and the heritage in the background, but sometimes it's just like, wow, that's a great look, and I know it's old, and the color's right, and it's cool.
Yeah. So we got a little dog. That's also online right now. I'm terrible with animals. That's not a Scotty, is it? That's not a Scotty, right?
Well, it's from Japan, and like a lot of Japanese things, it's sort of one thing and sort of another. If it was a Scotty, it'd be all black. If it was a Westie, it'd be white, and it's sort of a little of both. So I guess one of them was probably a fence jumping champion, and yeah. Anyhow,
it's a little bit of Stella. She has a white belly and black, but a little wrong. But yes, it is made in Japan. So I just thought it was cute.
I haven't seen Stella for a while in your videos.
She's an old woman. She is sleeping right now. You get advanced in age, and you just sleep all the time. So let's see. Oh, we got another little pair of kitschy salt and peppers. The hippos. I just thought those were cute. Something I haven't really seen before. And so I picked them up. Not much to say, I guess, about them. They are from Japan, mid-century time frame, 50s, 60s. But yes, those are on eBay.
And one thing about those, you notice the stoppers are plastic, and so that's going to be probably about 1970. Up until then, they were usually cork, and a lot of times they wouldn't even put a stopper in. I remember that some of the Treasure Craft ones, they'd have a slip of paper in that said, oh, if we forgot to put the cork in, just use tape. I mean, they just were very informal because they were really just for fun.
Well, one thing you have to, sometimes I find these and there's corks inside, and you can sit there and hear them, and people just replace the corks. But yes, okay. So you think probably more the 70s or 60s, 70s time frame?
About 1970, I would say. Yeah, when you see the plastic ones, because the plastic ones really are better because they can't fall inside.
Yeah. Oh, I've had my fair share of dealing with corks and trying to get them out, shoving a knife in it, and then you end up. Oh.
Yeah.
I spent way too long with a skewer and trying to break up the cork just to sit there. I'm not joking.
Oh, I believe it. I've used ice picks, all sorts of awls, all sorts of things trying to get them out.
You got a little figurine. So this is an interesting one. It is actually marked. What is it? Errand. Is it Hungary?
Mm-hmm.
Something that throws me off is whenever they use a V for the U, which is kind of these really weird symbols for an English letter. It makes it harder to identify, but you've got the Herend, Hungary, and then it says hand painted. But what I like about this is actually the coloring. It's kind of the finish, I guess. It's not I can't describe what I'm trying to say, but this is like, that looks like that, and this looks a little bit more satiny, or it just has a different colorway to it, maybe.
It's also much more precise. Heron is really good quality, and you know the difference. Heron is another thing like Lomonosov, where it was made for decades behind the Iron Curtain, and Americans hadn't really seen it. And now that we have trade with that part of the world, Heron is very popular, and a lot of it is rather expensive. I've got customers in Florida who look for Heron, and I mean, I've sold some relatively small pieces for good money, especially if it has the fishnet painted on it for some reason, which we see Andrea by Sadek copied that, but that was a Heron design originally, and that stuff really sells for money. So Heron's a good name to look for out there. And because it's been 30 or 40 years since it's been coming into this country, you will see it thrifting and at garage sales sometimes, because it's just old enough for some people who bought it new to just be letting go of it and not realize that it's a thing now.
Yeah, it is very cool. I don't really see it that often, honestly, over here, but maybe I'm not in the right places. Oh, okay. I just think I have 2 things left. Oh no, that's sad. So little figurine, I'll go kind of quick. It's not terribly old. It's actually kind of the chunky ceramic feel that it is, but I bought it because it is of hummingbirds, and they're always a popular kind of a bird. You don't usually see them. Finding a vintage ones, 50s, 60s, that's very tricky to find. A lot of times the little beaks are broken off, even if you do. So I picked it up. I think it's just a cute one, and that is online. And so the last item is actually this giant piece that we were having a little fun with, Misty and I. We were holding it. We were trying to guess what it was. But it is, okay, I'll show you this. If you watch the video, you know exactly what it is. But it has this wonderful kind of, again, I want to keep saying Nouveau, Art Nouveau sort of style here, or say Art Nouveau. It has 57. And do we have a lag? Can you?
Oh, you caught it.
Okay, so we have this interior here. The top is actually kind of thick. So Misty postulated that it could possibly be for bread. And I was saying, but it has 57 on the side. And I was thinking ketchup. Well, for my little research, I believe it's actually a promotional piece for bread, crackers, kind of that kind of stuff, by the Heinz 57 company. And this is really cool, actually. And you don't really see them very often, so I bought it. So that's currently on eBay right now. Do you have any other things to add about this?
Oh, I just think it's great. And Heinz 57 has always been very into doing promotional stuff. They've been around since, I think, the 1880s. They were one of the first consumer products, like packaged food companies. And so this, I think, dates to, did you say your research said around 1920?
I don't know if I looked up the exact date,
Yeah,
but I was going off of the style, and I was thinking very Nouveau, right around the 20s, if it was.
I think so, and especially with that thick top, it could even be earlier. You see a lot of that lithograph tin starting in the 1880s, 90s, and on from there. And some lithograph tins, especially if they're in really immaculate condition, can be extremely valuable. I've got a friend who deals in antique advertising and tin litho, and he has some amazing, beautiful pieces. And it was such a big deal. I think it wasn't until about 1890 that they had the technology to print on tin that way. And so then everybody wanted it, because you'd buy this product and you'd pay a little bit more, and then you'd have this neat thing you could use at your house. And you can tell that one got used. But yeah, I love that it was Heinz 57 on the side. And the other thing about that is, like I was saying, they gave out lots of stuff. One thing you'll see thrifting a lot are these little tiny pickles, and they're plastic, and they're a little pin, and it just says Heinz on the pickle. And those were given out at the Seattle World's Fair in 62 and the New York World's Fair in 64. And you could only get them there, or if you went to where they are in Pennsylvania and took the factory tours. So, but those are out there, and people love those because it's a little pickle, you know. So, you know, swag always is collectible later because people have a connection. Like you said, oh, I love ketchup, and I'm like, well, there you go.
Well, just to the normal amount. I'm not like obsessed, but yeah, I thought it was cool because I don't really see that kind of thing, like a promotional ketchup item that early too.
Well, don't send bottles and bottles of ketchup to Jeffrey, apparently.
No, I don't need your ketchup. I think I actually got through everything. Yeah, I mean, this was really great. My first live haul video, definitely a different experience, and it helps having you along so that you can actually accentuate some of the knowledge because I'm okay, but it's better with two people, especially someone who's been in the business for what have you been in there, like 30 years or so?
Yeah, 30 years this year. I cannot believe it's been that long. I started right out of school, so I
Wow.
guess I came by it honestly, and it was all just sort of a fluke. But boy, am I glad I'm here. It's just great, and it's really nice to have all of you with us, and it's so exciting to see that people are interested in this stuff and want to know more about it. So thanks for coming along.
Yes, I love this business too. It's some of the best years of my life, honestly. I would have never guessed that I could actually love my job and enjoy doing it every day and it not feel like work. So I would say if anyone is wanting to get into this line, just start. You don't have to go full fledged. You can keep your day job like I did, and you can do it on the weekends and work with it. And if you love it enough, if it's in your mind enough, follow it. Just follow it and see what happens. I think it's a fantastic business to be in personally. But I think this was really fun.
Yeah.
And by the way, George, his email, his YouTube channel is in the description. If you want to go check out his videos, he has lots of different types of things than I can even do because of what his specialty is, which is like, what do you do? Tell everybody about everything you do.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I'm on Periscope, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and I do a video at least every week on YouTube. And my thing is, I have been a real world antique dealer. I've run antique malls. I do shows. I do appraisals. I conduct estate sales. So I've done a lot of different things. And I really enjoy sharing that experience with people online and also trying to explain what it is that I see in things, some of the things I know or think I know, and also just what makes people interested in a particular type of category. And I can't focus on just one thing. So, I mean, I could be showing you a piece of furniture and then a piece of jewelry and then a piece of Moorcroft pottery. And they're all equally interesting to me because somebody out there loves it and there's a story behind it. And real people made them, real people collect them. And I love bringing the real world and the online world of collecting together. So that's my gig.
Well, that's fantastic. So I think this is a great time to end this video. And so I'll have one more video, I think, with George, I think tomorrow. I'm not sure. My schedule, I don't know. But I think we have either one or two more videos in the can. But yeah, I'm going to wrap up this video here. So thanks for watching. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye-bye.
Yes. Thumbs up, folks. Thanks.